And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, tonight's weather showing that it clears out here or dries out all across the southeast coast with some clearing along the North Gulf Coast here into the Kenai Peninsula down to Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay. This band of snow kind of narrowing but shifting southward gradually as colder air pushes into the northern interior and the northeast interior. And so light snow continues along this front here, at least down to the Alaska Range where it currently is. Some of that will start pushing south of the mountains late tonight and into tomorrow. Otherwise, this weakening front here coming up to the southwest coast with some moisture there. Rain for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, more rain out to the west. And then for tomorrow, that band of snow shifts southward here into the northern Copper River Basin, Talkeetna Mountains, Matanuska Valley, as well as the Susitna Valley with some light snow possible. Isolated rain or snow showers around Prince William Sound, but nothing significant there. Otherwise, partly clear day, or mostly clear for the northern panhandle, Yakutat, in toward Haines and Skagway with maybe a few clouds down to the south, but definitely dry conditions there. And out to the west, looking at this intense storm coming onto the chart here, that'll bring gale and storm force winds into the western Aleutians tomorrow evening. And then on Sunday, that intense low center moves right up over the western Aleutians there, the front extending eastward here, bringing wind and rain all the way to the Alaska Peninsula, at least the western Alaska Peninsula by afternoon, up toward the Pribilof Islands. Light snow here along the southwest coast, clear and cold over the northern interior here with a lot of clearing and a chance of snow across south central Alaska, Susitna Valley there into the Copper River Basin with maybe some mixed precipitation down along the North Gulf Coast. And for the coastal water forecast for the south coast, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots, central coast north at 15, and the north coast north to northeast at 10. Small craft advisories for Lynn Canal, winds north at 30, north 20 for Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait. And then for the day Sunday, east to southeast winds here on the south coast at 20 knots, mostly east at 20 on the central coast, east winds 15 knots on the north coast. And for Lynn Canal, north at 20 and northeast at 20 for Stevens Passage, southeast winds 20 knots for Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas. Light variable winds tomorrow for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Kamishak Bay, Barren Islands here, as well as Cook Inlet. Real light wind day coming up for all areas here at about 10 knots with seas 2 to 5 feet. And then for Sunday, a little bit of an increase in the winds here. Cook Inlet north to northeast at 15 to 20 knots. Northeast 20 for Kamishak Bay. Otherwise, light variable winds continue for the Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast. East wind at about 10 for Prince William Sound. Eastern North Gulf Coast, east to southeast at 15. Kodiak Island tomorrow, light variable winds at 10 knots. Southeast at 20 for Bristol Bay. And the Alaska Peninsula looking at east to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots. For Sunday, Alaska Peninsula, east to southeast winds 20 to 30 knots. East at 20 for Bristol Bay, and variable to southeast winds at 10 to 15 knots for Kodiak Island. Eastern Aleutians, west-northwest winds tomorrow 20 to 25 knots, west at 20 to 25 knots there for the central Aleutians. And then storm force winds, gales and storms coming into the western Aleutians here, anywhere from 35 to 50 knots with higher gusts. And then for the day on Sunday, that low center pulling right up here over Kiska Island, and so winds blowing around that, gale force winds, some cases storm force winds, anywhere from 40 to 50 knots, seas up to 25 to 30 feet. Good gales here for Adak and Atka, south at 45 knots in the eastern Aleutians, southeast winds 30 to 45 knots. Southwest coast tomorrow, southeast winds 25 knots, east winds 30 knots, first wind advisories for Norton Sound, east winds at 20 knots for St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, southeast at 20, west at 15 for the Pribilofs. And then those winds pick up out of the east at 30 knots for St. Paul and St. George. St. Matthew Island, northern Bering Sea here, looking at gale force winds out of the east at 40. And 25 knot easterly winds, St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, as well as the Kuskokwim Delta coast, east at 30 in Norton Sound. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, east winds 20 to 25 knots. The west side here, east at 20 knots. And the Chukchi Sea, east winds 30 to 35 knots. And then for the day on Sunday for the Chukchi Sea, east winds 25 to 30 knots. Brisk wind advisories here for the western Arctic coast, east at 25, down to 15 knots on the central coast and 20 knots from the east on the eastern coast.